Santa Cruz City Council is back in session. The clerk will call the roll to establish a quorum.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members Newsom.
Present.
Brown.
Here.
Watson. Here. Bruner.
Present.
Kalantari Johnson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Golder.
Here.
Mayor Keeley.
Here. Quorum having been established, we are moving to item 24. This is a report on the fiscal year 24-25 proposed fiscal year budget for the city of Santa Cruz. We will receive a staff report. We're going to receive comments from our city manager, then a staff report from our finance director, our department heads who are wonderful, are here and will be available to answer questions by members of the city council. We will also take public comment on this as well. This is not the only opportunity to comment on the budget. The city council will be taking a subsequent action to adopt the fiscal year budget at a subsequent meeting. I will say that as we begin this, I want to express my thanks and appreciation to the city manager and the fiscal team, Ms. Cabell in particular. Thank you to you and your team for assembling this budget. Thank you to all the department heads and others and your staff folks who participate in building your departmental budget and the city budget each year. You do a very good job on behalf of our city. We appreciate it. It is my view in the 4 elective offices that I've had the privilege of holding that the single most important activity that any elected body engages in, whether it's the city, the county, the state of California, is the adoption of the annual budget. It is the blueprint for our hopes and dreams and aspirations, how we intend to operationalize those. It is not a, I believe, cynical comment to say that if it isn't in the budget, it doesn't matter. I think that it is a fair comment to say that with regard to most public policy, if you want to advance the public policy, it does need an appropriation in almost all cases. So this budget activity is where I think we create ourselves as a small end of the funnel to look in an intense basis for a day or two at all of the functions of our city government, how the administration, what its views are of the future, and what the elected leadership of the city decides that in conjunction with our administrative team, what is it we want to get done in this upcoming fiscal year. So again, thank you to all of you who participate in the budget process. And Mr. City Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate those opening remarks, Mayor. At times, folks get a little perplexed at how excited we get about our city budget, but it really is one of the most important policy documents that the Council approve on an annual basis, and I am pleased to present our proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. The proposed budget reflects the City Council's priorities as set forth in the 2023-2028 strategic plan. It was just recently updated. The budget is really an opportunity for us to operationalize what the Council is telling, and by extension, the community is telling city staff is most important to them. As we transition away from the financial uncertainties of the COVID-19 pandemic and a return to pre-pandemic economic patterns, our general fund faces challenges in meeting increased expenses and community service demands. However, despite those fiscal constraints, the proposed budget maintains our organization's tradition of excellence, innovation, and strategic planning, ensuring continued high-quality services are delivered to our community on a daily basis. The proposed fiscal year 2025 budget totals, this might be hard to believe, approximately $433 million across all of our operating departments. It also includes a capital investment program budget of $113.4 million and the general fund allocation of approximately $150.5 million reinforces our commitment to prioritizing essential services, advancing the City Council's initiatives. And some good news, following the printing and posting of the initial proposed budget, which initially relied on a $2.4 million in reserves, use of balanced revenues with expenditures, Through additional review of revenue assumptions, including strong admissions tax and utility user tax growth, we now have a fully balanced budget without use of fund balance or reserves. So very pleased to share that. It's a testament to the work that our finance team has been doing, and we'll get more into those details here in a moment. So our presentation today will focus on progress and action that's really layered throughout the budget document itself. We'll provide a high-level overview of the budget update for fiscal year 2025. We'll provide some details related to our capital investment program, and then we look forward to robust discussion, questions, direction from the City Council. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of intention in building out the proposed budget. It was built on and informed by the Council's strategic plan, including the 7 focus areas that you see before you. Our city teams have been very busy investing in the service, projects, and programming that the Council and community have said are most important to you. And you will see those priorities emphasized throughout the budget document. And of course, the budget was not developed in a vacuum, and it was not developed overnight. A citywide budget of this magnitude necessitates countless hours of teamwork, collaboration, and a lot of patience along the way. I wanted to extend a special thank you to the members of our finance team. That includes Elizabeth Cabell, Marisol Gomez, Tracy Cole, and Emily Burden. Your dedication, innovative thinking, and adaptability were instrumental in navigating this complex and ever-evolving process of building a citywide budget. I also want to extend my gratitude to Assistant City Manager Laura Schmidt, whose leadership, support, and strategic direction were indispensable throughout the process. I also believe that this will be her last city budget. She's departing from us in July, and she was really instrumental in helping to develop the budget you have before you. I would also like to thank the City Council and Mayor for your leadership throughout this process, your robust and helpful feedback, helping to inform the proposed budget you have in front of you, as well as our executive leadership team of department heads, our department budget leads, and the many city staff who helped collaborate and contributed to the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. So thank you to all of our many city staff that were instrumental in developing the budget you have before you. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Elizabeth, our finance director, for further presentation.
Ms. Cabell, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. So I'd like to start with sort of looking at the budget process overall. On page 21 of your budget, we start talking about what that process is. It really is a year-round process. We are actually meeting with budget leads throughout the year. It's not just the few months leading up to the preparation of the document. But we look in the fall to City Council for goals and priorities. In the bulk of putting the budget together happens in the January through May timeframe with lots of meetings. And then we do hearings in May and then adopt in June. So part of the review process that really starts as soon as we adopt the budget, we start looking back and looking at how we can improve it. So in 25, we have several things that are new to the budget that we wanted to point out. We do have a strategic plan that was adopted, so we have that reflected in the budget. And it not only specifically what the strategic plan is, but in the department summaries, we have all of the goals and accomplishments tied out as well to the City Council strategic goals. We also have improved, gone on to the next phase of our health and all policies, where we are incorporating the pillars of equity, sustainability, and public health. We have those identified as well in the department summaries, the goals and accomplishments that support those, as well as in the CIP. So we have that spread throughout the document. Speaking of CIP, we've pretty much totally revamped the way that is presented. First of all, you may notice it's less pages, which is always good. We also have the beginning of each department has a summary of their CIP projects, both present and future projects. We have fact sheets for every project that has funding in 2025. We also have a couple of maps that will be of interest. We have on page 258, we have the opportunity zone map where we have identified projects in the various opportunity zones throughout the city. And then we also, starting on page 259, have projects by council district. So you can see that listed as well as geographically where they are. And then another section that we've expanded this year is the financial and budgetary policies. This year, what we've added there is we have a table where we indicate, are we in compliance, maybe not quite in compliance, or out of compliance by red, green, and yellow bubbles. So there are only two policies that none are in red, but we do have two policies where we are not 100% in compliance. That is our stabilization reserve. Our policy requires 2 months unrestricted reserve. We're not there yet, so that policy, we're in the yellow there. We also, the Economic Development Trust Fund is another policy that we're in the yellow. We usually do a transfer to that fund. We did not do that in 25 so that we could present a balanced budget. That will come back in 26, but that's another policy that we recognize we're out of compliance on. Okay, and a couple of themes for 25. This is our first full post-pandemic budget. We have no state or federal funding that we've had for the past couple of years. So this is our full, everything is just general fund budget. We have no ARPA money from the federal government, as well as none of the state funding. We've used all of that. We also talk a lot about a status quo budget. So we do have a status quo where we tried to do a status quo budget. That's really referring to our discretionary spending. And to kind of put that a little bit in perspective, and for the general fund in our $150 million budget, about 30% of that is truly discretionary spending, which we refer to as trying to keep the status quo. We did recognize and do recognize that there's lots of things that are out of our control, contract increases, increases in costs for supplies. So we did bring those into the budget, so we are not asking departments to absorb those additional contract costs. Those are built in, we did add those into the budget. Even with all of these changes that we've done, we did reduce, as I mentioned, the transfer to the Economic Development Trust Fund. We also did not do our $5 million transfer to the CIP fund. Even with all of that, we are still continuing to try to keep revenues balanced with expenditures so that we can hopefully get to a point where we can build up our reserves. But we continue to struggle with that and to look for additional revenue opportunities. Along those lines, we do want to have a huge thank you for the passage of Measure L. This half-cent sales tax allowed us to continue several of these ongoing projects that we have here: climate, public works, field services, rental programs, homelessness outreach and shelter, Harvey West Pool, fire equipment, just to name a few. In general, it's allowing us to maintain our services even though costs are increasing. Having that additional sales tax revenue really allows us to continue providing the services that we have. So just kind of reflecting back on, back in November, we brought a long-range financial plan to council. And in there, we identified several different strategies for kind of closing that fiscal gap that we've been talking about. So during this year, we've implemented many of those. The sales tax measure is one of them. We have been working on a fee study that we plan to bring to council in October that will bring us closer to more fuller cost recovery in our fees. We've also brought on an investment advisor that's allowed us to improve our investment allocation and returns on our investments. And we've been doing a few more. We brought back some TOT audits. We kind of put that on pause for a while. Those have come back. So we're implementing many of these strategies that we've identified here, kind of in the categories of expenditure costs, service delivery changes, and revenue enhancements. So looking at what we are projecting for the next few years, as I mentioned for 25, or as Matt mentioned, we are bringing a balanced budget. We initially had projected a $2.4 million deficit. Between the time of printing and today, we've been able to do some additional work to examine the revenues as well as the expense side of things to bring that into balance. We really wanted to not have to project dipping into reserves. So we're able to do that for 25. We also expect 24 to come in balanced. We adopted a balanced budget for 24, and we do expect that trend to continue as we get closer to closing the year. 26 and 27, you'll see a dip, and that's really as we bring back those transfers, the Economic Development Trust Fund, the CIP, those transfers come back in, so that's why you see a dip there. In 28, we kind of go back up a little bit, and that is really reflective of new hotels coming online, so we have additional TOT revenue, as well as the fact that we have been making a $2 million transfer to the IT fund every year to support our new enterprise resource planning system that we're in the process of getting implemented. So that transfer stops or sunlights in 28. So that's why you see a little bit of a bump there. And then, you know, basically after that, we're still kind of chasing revenues, chasing expenditures. The chart on the right there is the one that reflects where our reserves are. The red line is where we want to be. We want to be at 2 months unrestricted reserves. Right now, where we are, we're below that red line. The pension reserve, which is kind of the second and fourth boxes there, those that is a reserve that we have. It is restricted, so we don't count that, or that is not counted as part of our meeting the needs, meeting the policy in our stabilization policy. So we do have that pension reserve. It can only be used for pensions. The other two reserves, you can tell we are still a little bit below or where we would like to be. Since we expect 24 and 25 to come in balanced, I don't anticipate any change in those reserves right now. Everything will pretty much stay exactly where they are for the next 2 years. If we do have a surplus, then we can look at what that means exactly for our reserves. We can get things a little closer. But basically, we look at, we're still trying to get up to our 2-month reserve target. So getting into the numbers. So this is how the first column here is the budget that you have in the proposed document we had for the general fund. So we showed a deficit of 2.4 million. So what we have done and tried to not use reserves. So we did a little bit deeper dive into some of our revenues. We looked at the model and how things are being calculated. We also took into account that we have the county overall is the tourism industry is really coming back stronger than we had anticipated. So we increased our revenue for ad tax. That's something we usually budget very low on just because it's very volatile. We don't know what's going to happen if there's a pandemic or something. So we usually budget that very low. We did bump that up a little bit, as well as increases to the utility users tax that we noticed in our model were not calculating correctly. And then a couple of that 300,000 there, some other changes that we made in expenses, just to, some cleanup there to make sure that things were going to the right funds. So with those, we are able to bring in a budget of 150.3 million in revenues and the same 150.3 million in expenditures. So I talked a little bit about contract costs and how those are increasing. So even though we strove with departments to try and keep the budget status quo, we were able to add this additional 1.6 million in contract increases, legal compliance requirements, things that we had to do. We have the development software that we have, the land permitting software. We did put an additional 500,000 into that. So all of these things are additional 1.6 that we're able to actually come in a little bit above or kind of give to departments so they did not have to absorb those costs. In the past, we've asked departments to absorb contract increases. So we're very happy this year to be able to not put that burden on the departments, but be able to bring it into the budget. So this is some of the things that are those contract increases, that 774,000 on the previous slide. These are some of the things that the contract increases that we have in the budget. Harvey West Pool, we've got some software, Microsoft 365, water rates at the golf course, mattress replacements in the fire stations, fee study, fuel. So all of these things are basically increases that were out of our control. So we didn't want to put that burden to the departments. The general fund will be added money for these increases. And then for positions in the general fund, we are recommending 6 positions here. One in the city council office to support, or administrative assistant to support city council and CPVAW. Human resources and administrative assistant. IT, a business systems analyst. We've got lots of new implementations. I mentioned our enterprise resource planning. We've got the permitting system. We have lots of new initiatives on the IT side, so they've requested a business systems analyst to support that. The 3 positions in police are to allow for a better career ladder for staff. Following these additions, there will be the freezing of positions. So really the net for those 3 police positions is about $65,000. So it's not the full $350 that you see there. So, but those positions, so that just allows for some more growth in the police department. So then all of these are another $1.3 million in positions that we have for other funds. This reflects up at the top, we've got 3 economic development positions that will be funded by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Public Art Fund. And then finance is having a new position, a risk management tech, and that will be funded by the Liability Fund. IT, another business systems analyst, this one specifically to be spread out and supported to support the various enterprise funds. 10% of that will be general fund, but the rest of it will be paid for by the enterprise funds. And then Public Works, an additional mechanic that's supported by the Fleet Fund, and 4 resource recovery workers in the Refuse Fund to reflect changing. We used to have we're bringing some contract services in-house, so that's the 4 additional positions that we have in the refuse department. And then something that we have a little bit more of this year that we haven't had in the past is limited term positions. You've heard, I've talked a lot about our enterprise resource planning, our ERP system. So to support that initiative, we're in the process of finding a vendor, making that selection, and then starting the implementation. So to do that, this is a huge burden on staff. So we have asked departments to identify what sort of limited term support they would need to help us get through this implementation. All of these are for 3-year limited term. They're fully benefited positions. They just are 3 years instead of ongoing. And they're specifically to help us backfill so that current staff can be used to help move forward the implementation of the ERP. The exception there is the Assistant Urban Forester for Parks. That is that's funded by a grant that they received. So that position also is a limited term, but not directly related to the ERP. So looking at our citywide budget, $320 million. This does not include the CIP. This is just the operating budget. So bulk of that, of course, is the general fund, but then we've got all of our enterprise funds over there, special revenue funds, internal service, everything, all things operations. So that's our $320 million citywide budget. So looking at the CIP, in 24, we adopted a policy, a mandate of pause, prioritize, and plan, so that we did not provide new general fund funding for CIP projects in 24. And we're going to continue that in 25. It's specifically just the general fund funding. There's lots of other funding that CIP projects have, so things are not slowing down. There's still lots going on. But it allows us to kind of focus on those projects that we have out there that may have other funding, or that we can move general fund funding around. Again, some numbers to put out there. We have about $142 million general CIP program, again, not including the enterprise funds. This year, we've spent about $26.5 million of that. Another 14.7 is encumbered. And here's a list of some of the projects that we have that are part of that. So we've been making significant progress on lots of CIP projects. So in fiscal year 25, part of what enables us to balance the budget is not having that $5 million transfer. So we're going to continue that one more year, hope to bring that back in 26. And then just all of the departments who are part of the CIP program have been very strategic in looking at other funding sources, other funding that may be general fund but can be moved from this project to that project. So there's been a lot of work to figure out exactly how we can continue moving forward in 25 without additional general fund funding. Here's a few of the projects that were completed in 24. and some of the things that are planned for 25. Back to Matt.
All right, thank you so much, Elizabeth. So as we wrap fiscal year 24, we're incredibly proud of the work that's currently underway. And we do look at fiscal year 25 with a sense of optimism. We think it provides the city council, the community, and city staff a really robust policy direction to continue achieving the work that's contemplated in your strategic plan. We think it also enhances organizational resilience through mindful fiscal strategies. It helps to maintain fiscal stability while supporting innovative services. And it helps to collaborate with city staff to effectively prioritize services for the community. So we look forward to having a robust discussion this morning, answering your questions, and receiving any direction you might have on the proposed budget. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the city manager and the finance director and to your team and to all the department heads and those involved in putting the budget together, including our workers who provide input, I suspect, at all levels in all departments. So thank you all very much for this. Let me start through and see if council members have questions. I'm going to start with the vice mayor and work this way, then I'm going to start here and work this way. Madam Vice Mayor.